Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cumberland School Committee meeting. Today, September 28, 2017. I would like to call it to order and ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Tomatica makes a motion for the approval of the agenda. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon. All in favor? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next item on the agenda is the Student Government Report, Student Activities. If you could please state your name and your grade. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Ballou, and I am the senior class president.
And I'm Stephen Sciolino, the Student Government Secretary. I'm a junior.
Welcome.
Student government kicked off the school year at a student government meeting at Cumberland House of Pizza at the end of the summer to go over all of the events for the year. On the 28th of August, student government members led tours at the open house and freshman orientation. On the 13th of September, CHS hosted its annual color run, and the Clipper Carnival was held on September 15th with activities in the school. The activities at the upper field were canceled due to the possibility of rain. During that week, Up With People held various multicultural educational activities for students as well. Up With People had shows in the Wellness Center that weekend. The first official student government meeting was held on Tuesday, September 19th in the cafeteria, where we discussed the events coming up in October. Finally, on September 25th, student government helped parents find their children's classrooms at Meet the Teacher Night.
On the 5th of October, Cumberland High School will be hosting a college fair in the Trans Cafeteria for high school juniors and seniors. The next student government meeting will be in October. Will be held on Tuesday the 17th at 6 p.m. in the cafeteria. You're welcome to join us for more specific information on what we're doing. And finally, our Spirit Week will be running from the 23rd to the 28th, celebrated with the following activities: powder puff football and cheer on Tuesday evening in the Wellness Center, lip sync and on Wednesday in the auditorium, class clash on Thursday in the Wellness Center, and the pep rally at the end of the school day on Friday, and at Tucker Field before the football game at 7 p.m. The homecoming dance will be a semi-formal dance held on Saturday, October 28th in the cafeteria. We appreciate your time and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ballou, I remember when you were so young and dancing, and your mom is very proud of you. You've grown up very fast, and I feel very old. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember. I'm following her career through Cumberland Public Schools. Thank you. I've known him for a long time. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes for the regular meeting 9/14/2017, special meeting 9/21/2017, approval of minutes for executive session 9/14/2017, and executive session 9/21/2017. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Denon has a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Friedman. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report out of executive session meeting. Report out of executive session meeting from this evening, 9/28/2017. There were no votes, but there was a vote to seal the minutes of the executive session. Pleasure of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Denon. Mr. Denon has a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Hess. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Mr. Mitchell, flu vaccination clinics scheduled October 11th, 19th, and November 6th. I saw the sign upon walking in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to those two agenda items, I just thought it was appropriate, based on the news that we received today, the really exceptional and very special news that we received today regarding community school. being one of 3 schools in the state of Rhode Island designated as blue ribbon schools. So I think it's important that we recognize the students and staff and leadership of Community School for being one of only 3 schools in the state of Rhode Island that have been designated as blue ribbon schools. And if I may, I would like
Please.
to share the release by the Rhode Island Department of Ed regarding this particular issue.
Excellent.
Very quickly, the U.S. Department of Education today announced 3 Rhode Island schools as National Blue Ribbon Schools for 2017 based on their overall academic excellence or their progress in closing achievement gaps. The schools receiving this honor are Classical High School in Providence, Community Elementary School in Cumberland, and Fishing Cove Elementary School in North Kingstown. Providing challenging, high quality, and engaging learning experiences is what our public schools are called upon to do. And our blue ribbon schools set the bar high, said Governor Gina Raimondo. Our success as a state, economically and otherwise, relies on education, and our blue ribbon schools serve as a model for how we can improve outcomes for all schools and all students. Congratulations to these school communities on this exciting achievement. Being recognized as a blue ribbon school is a tremendous accomplishment. It takes strong leadership, dedicated educators, hardworking students, and a school culture that inspires excellence, said Barbara Cottom, chair of the Board of Education. Thank you to Classical, Community, and Fishing Cove schools for your commitment to great teaching and learning. So there are other accolades in this release, including the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Ken Wagner. But I think one really important point to be made here is the fact that there are over 100,000 public and private schools in the United States, and only 342 schools are selected to be blue ribbon schools. So it is quite an achievement and quite an honor for Community School and the town of Cumberland for this outstanding recognition. So we couldn't be more proud. Yes.
And it was on your watch, Mr. Mitchell, so good job.
So there'll be more information to come, and there is a celebration in Washington, D.C., where schools are recognized, and we'll be coordinating that effort over the next couple of weeks. So also on the agenda is, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we have Cumberland flu clinics, and there are clinics scheduled on Wednesday, October 11th, Thursday, October 19th, and Monday, November 6th. All 3 of those dates, the time is from 4 to 6:30, and the location is Cumberland High School. We'll have this posted on the website so families can take advantage of this opportunity, and the flu shots are free. The only other thing that I wanted to mention, I think it's important to keep the school committee and the community updated on the facilities of progress that we have made. And as you know, we meet every Wednesday, and we do that very consistently. Meetings are at 10:30 every Wednesday. We met yesterday, and not a whole lot more to report. I just think that the most important thing is progress is still being made on the Garvin fire alarm system. They are moving along on that. And despite the weather that we've been experiencing over the last week or so, we want to make sure that everything is ready to go when the weather starts to change. We want to make sure that all of the buildings have heat. And the only, and I don't want to say it's a concern, because we are assured by the project manager that Community School, which has 3 new boilers that have already been installed, but there's some additional work that needs to be done before those boilers can be fired up. We have been assured that everything will be ready to go when the weather changes. So we're in good shape, and we are actually starting to have conversations about the next phase of our facilities work, which continues our asbestos abatement work, and in consideration as to, how we want to replace things like, our air control, heating and air control devices in each of our schools. So just wanted to give you a quick update there.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Next item on the agenda is Chairperson's Report. Fiscal year 2018 budget update. I have nothing to report at this time, but I would like to mention that Councilwoman Lisa Bolio is here, and former school committee member Linda Teal is here as well. So welcome. Mrs. Teal, we can pull up a chair for you if you want to.
Policy needs.
Next item on the agenda, reports of standing committees, payment of bills. Mr. DeMonica.
Mr. Chairman, there were no payment of bills for this, for last night.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item, fiscal management subcommittee update. Don't go anywhere, Mr. DeMonica. There you go.
All right, so fiscal did meet. We met with Sedesco Food Services. They're getting the year going. And we talked briefly about the food trailer growing out back there that they're going to start growing things in. Everyone from the school committee did get a copy, hopefully, of the report that Sedesco had done for the work they did through the summer, so you have some idea of the work they did. And there are a couple of items that are going to be on the agenda later for payment of bills for some of the summer work and work going on throughout the district. So those were some of the items we just talked about, India swimming as well in our meeting. So that's the update that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item on the agenda, policy and procedures subcommittee update. Mr. Fiorillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of items tonight. We had a discussion on policy E2, the transportation study. It was just a general discussion about, walking distances and bus stops, different things of appropriate ages of children to be left at bus stops alone. It was really just a wide-reaching discussion surrounding all of our transportation and walking issues, and we had taken no action on that item. We may further discuss it in the future after we had a chance to look at some other towns' policies, because our policy is very simple policy, very straightforward, but we're going to just look to see if there's anything else we should be doing with it. The other topic of discussion was our new policy, I-9 internet filtering policy, which has been laid out by, I'm sorry, Mike, is that a federal or just state? State item. The General Assembly created a law stating that every district should have a internet filtering policy. RIDE handed down a template to use, and that is essentially what we discussed tonight. It was a good discussion about all the ins and outs of what we would want to do with internet filtering to protect our students, but also one of the main ingredients in that is to set up a technology committee, which would be made up of people from throughout the school district, different buildings, administrators, tech people, obviously, teachers, somebody from the libraries, and they would be the ones who actually have the discussion as to what should be filtered, what should not be filtered, and it would create a smoother process if something is found that is being filtered but shouldn't be filtered. The ACLU actually gave high marks to RIDE's policy that they had crafted for everyone, and this policy was approved in policy 3-0. It is not on the agenda for the first reading tonight. It will be on in 2 weeks. This way it'll give the public any kind of time to ask questions or concerns. I don't know if Mr. Denon or Mr. Hess would like to add to that, being the technology gurus of the policy committee.
Denon, Mr. Hess?
We also had just a brief discussion about policies that we're going to address in coming meetings. One being a social networking policy, which we've discussed in the past. So that'll be on a future agenda, along with, we need to just do some updating of our harassment policy. There's some information that is just old information that needs to be updated. And also, we had discussed, Mr. DeMonica actually brought up a new policy to address contracts that should be approved by the school committee, so that'll be something that we'll discuss in a future meeting. Thank you.
Very well, excellent update. Next item on the agenda, Achievement and Communications Subcommittee update. Mr. Dennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Achievement and Communications Subcommittee met on Tuesday night, and we had one agenda item, which was a big agenda item. We had the high school leadership team, Principal Charlton and Michelle Carter and Kate McMorrow were there to talk about everything that's going on in the high school, and especially Mrs. Charlton's observations since coming here. She obviously it's a new team, so they bring fresh ideas and they make observations, and will eventually make additional recommendations. We talked a lot about the class offerings at CHS and the mix of AP classes versus non-AP classes or other kinds of classes, and talked about different pathways. Right now we have the biomed pathway. There's a plan to put a robotics pathway in for next year. And it's a robotics and engineering or pre-engineering. I forget the title of it, but you get the gist. We talked about bridging the gap between 8th and 9th grade. It's something we've talked a lot about, and we look forward to those discussions continuing. We didn't get into too much detail with those. We ended with a discussion about guidance, and at a future meeting, we're going to have the guidance counselors come in to have a more in-depth discussion. It's supposed to be our next meeting, but I'm not sure we've scheduled it yet. It'll probably be in 2 weeks if all goes well. I'm looking for Mr. Damon. He's not here. Oh, he's down there. He's not listening to me. It's okay. So we hope to bring guidance in and talk to them about just giving an update about Tuesday's meeting. And there's more to come on that. The meeting that we had this past Tuesday was too short. I feel like we could have spent hours talking about the high school. So I expect to ask Mrs. Charlton to come back and give us some more updates over the coming year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Dennett. Next item on the agenda, comments from the public. Anyone? Approach the podium, state your name. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, old business. Mrs. Bowie, I believe it's, oh no, there's no more public comment. Next item on the agenda, old business update with Durham School Services on bus routes and schedules. Mr. Neves, come right up to the podium, please. How are you tonight? Good, thank you.
Pleasure to be here once again. Update on the bus routes. From the last meeting, we had bus 40, which was being late arriving at the preschool. That has been corrected. We actually took a tier off of it. It does not go to Cumberland Hill in the afternoon, which corrected that.
I'm sorry, which bus was that, Mr.
That
Neves?
was bus 40.
Bus 40, okay.
Bus 40. So it was late going to preschool. Corrected that. That was just a tier. Bus 19, Main Street, we had a problem with them being late.
The Ashton bus?
Ashton bus. We mainstream, took a couple of stops off of it, put them on another bus. We kept them basically on Mendon Road from Darvin instead of going into some neighborhoods, switched them routes out. And that has actually corrected, probably taken about 8 to 10 minutes arriving early at Ashton at this point in time. So it's really doing well. And it's a going thing, especially with the traffic on Mendon Road. Hectic, if anything, but those changes will be continuing, and if we continue to do better, we will do better. So we have corrected those. Plus 26 for community. What we're going to try, and this is after a lot of discussion, we are going to try on a temporary basis for 2 weeks to reverse the PM run. What I mean by reversing the PM run, it's going to do the AM run started at Mercy Mount, went through into the reservoir area, came out onto Diamond Hill, did some stops on Diamond Hill, went to community. So of course the Mercy Mount children were traveling on the bus mornings, which they were. coming back, they did it reversed, did the Diamond Hill Reservoir, and then the Mercy Mount. So they both ways, Mercy Mount did have the longest run. That area had the longest run. So what we plan on trying, on a 2-week basis, we're going to test it for 2 weeks. We're going to do the Diamond Hill area on the way back home. Go to Mercy Mount instead of going into the reservoir and then come around the reservoir. What that does is, let me just pull a cheat sheet out that I have here. Basically, 4 stops will not change, which is the Diamond Hill road. 1 stop gets home earlier. 6 stop changes get home later. So 4 to 7 children get home earlier. 15 to 20 children get home a little bit later. Basically, is what's going to be happening with that temporary thing. We're trying it on a trial basis. If not, we'll see what other corrections we may be able to make. But I believe this is not going to be a major change, but it's going to help the people that are on the bus to learn this. So those are our trouble runs. What's happened since we've been here is we've had to add or change a couple stops. That's a constant thing. We're getting calls every day saying stops need to be changed. What the process is with that is we'll get a call. We'll send our safety team out, call the police department, traffic officer. Don Forrest comes out with me. Actually, he came out to a stop with us that morning on Baldwin and High Street. Yeah. Eventually, that did get changed to Timberwolf and Baldwin. It was an additional stop because we could not take the Baldwin and High off completely, but we did add that stop for that neighborhood. We've added a couple stops due to safety factors on Jenks Road for the high school and not the high school, for the middle school and community elementary have a Jenks Road stop now instead of coming down to Jenks Road and West Rentham Road. West Rentham and Pine, they were coming, Pine Swamp, they were coming down to. Now we do have a stop up on Jenks Road now. That started, I think, approximately a week ago. What we've seen has already happened is, and we've had to have the police up there, is the parents are bringing the children to the stop still, which is fine, but the way the parents are parking, we're having problems getting the buses through. So that's going to be correct because the police officers have been up there and they're going to be going up there constantly. I'm going to go up there and check.
Which route is that? Which school?
That's bus 15 for community. 15 for North Cumberland Middle School does the Jenks Road stop for middle school children. Bus 143 in the afternoon, and 9 will be doing the Jenks Road stop for the elementary community children. So we've had to add a couple stops. Right now it is for the high school and for North Cumberland Middle School in the Highland Corp area. Originally, those children in the new facilities that they're building up there were coming down to Mendon Road. It's a long trip. It's a long trip up from that area. So we're sending a bus up there right now, which is going to add some problems because there's continual building going on up there. So at some point,
Highland Office Park.
Highland Corp.
Corporate.
Yeah.
How many buses do we have?
Cumberland side.
How many buses?
2 buses going up there right now: a high school and a middle school. North Cumberland Middle School.
How many kids?
I believe there's about 4, maybe 5 high school and North Cumberland Middle School children that are there right now. But it's still building in that area, so that's going to add to the. I believe that would be Cumberland Hill bus going up there at some point in time. The building, the amount of building that's going on in town, it's you know what it's doing to your schools. I'm realizing what it's doing to the buses every day. And this is Bill here. Yeah, definitely. Like, for one thing, we had the Berkeley Commons come in, which was supposed to be 55 and older. I believe the last count is between 30 and 35 students in that complex alone. So every time they come in, there's more students coming in. So that's about the update that I have. I'm here to answer any questions you have of anyone.
Thank you, Paul. Questions from the committee? Mr. Fiorillo?
Well, bus 26.
Yes.
As you know, Mr. Mitchell and I rode that bus. And I mean, it was a beautiful day, no traffic. It was about 43 minutes. The problem with that route, in my opinion, too many stops. You have, I mean, aside from, you said Mercy Mount, just to be clear, it's basically 2 stops right near Mercy Mount that then drives through Mercy Mount. So that and then they go over to the reservoir area, which adds a few minutes from those 2 stops. But is there a bus that could pick those kids up on Fisher Road? Maybe. And then you also have, I believe, 1 or 2 stops down in the Thomas Lighton plat, which also adds a few more minutes to it. Is there a way to make that bus just go straight up to the reservoir, deal with all of that? Because there are bus runs that, at least on paper, are like 10 to 15 minutes long. And then that one is about 35 minutes long.
Bus that could do that in the morning, but only for AM, because what we would do, the only way we'd be able to do that is to use one of the Mercy Mount buses that is dropping up at approximately 8:30, doing that Fisher Road area, coming out in that Diamond Hill Road area, just those stops, but it would not work in the afternoon because the Mercy Mount buses would not be available on time to get the community on time. So that, I mean, the possibility of that happening would be morning it would change, but the Route 26 would basically be the same for the afternoon. So the children would be riding 2 different buses if you did that. That's why we really didn't go to that option. And also, what I wanted to explain with the 26, the change, that's going to start on the Tuesday after Columbus Day. We will start notifying parents tomorrow. All the parents will get phone calls with, they should go on voicemails and answering machine, basically.
That's something we could also do through email, through through communities listserv.
Send it out to the bus 26. I mean, I do believe you can.
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Fiorillo.
Where are we with the Where's My Bus app? Sent it out to who? Okay.
And actually, we had a discussion. Ann and I had a discussion this morning about this. I will be calling them tomorrow once again to see what we can do and get that. We are going to get that up. And once that's up, the parents and the school department will actually know exactly where the buses are at every point in time.
Yeah, I know, because, I mean, it surprises me that corporate hasn't responded to you faster, only because when you go to the website, it's like the first thing you see on their website. So.
Well, I can tell you that corporate has gone through some employment changes, and now you got to try to get to the right person that's in charge of that issue now. And we're working through that issue. So they have gone through some changes at the corporate, and we are working on getting that out.
Chandler, could you reach out to Paul tomorrow or vice versa to see about the that broadcast email, the bus 26? All right, excellent, thank you. Mr. Hess.
Mr. Neves, can you update us on where we stand with the video camera system? Yeah.
That's exactly where we are. We do have those 6 cameras out there in revolving buses. There's 2 ways we can do that. Mr. Mitchell requested that we put cameras on certain buses. Those 2 certain buses that are having some issues right now. We can switch a bus and put just the magnets for that bus number on the bus, which has the camera already, or we can switch a camera. Probably, if I was to estimate, Monday or Tuesday, you'll probably see that bus with magnets on it. Because right now, maintenance is trying to keep buses up, and we brought some new buses in that need to still get up. So we're working very hard. The maintenance team is working very hard getting all that stuff taken care of. But that's where we are with the business.
Thank you.
Mr. DeMonica?
Well, on the routes here, the Cumberland Police signed off on all of them. There were no other
Cumberland
outstanding.
Police signed off on the original routes. Yes, they have.
Okay.
Any changes basically are approved by John Forrest, and some of them are initiated by John Forrest. The traffic.
My next question is, at the last town council meeting, State Representative Jim McLaughlin came up to us as we were leaving and said the state passed a new law in regards to being able to use smaller buses or vans. I'm not sure exactly what it meant. I don't know if you've heard anything in regards to that.
Safety of those vans is not up to where it should be. Because what it is, basically, it's a caravan that they're using. And I can show you pictures of a school bus getting T-boned and a caravan being T-boned, and it's not a pretty estimate. It's not a very good issue when it happens. Either way, we know that the school bus is a lot more safe. Either one, either a minibus or a large bus.
Mr. Denon?
Do you know if students are all students getting to school on time?
My knowledge, at least 97% of the people are getting to school.
Like, we don't have like a bus that's chronically late. Earlier this year, I think we did. Yeah.
19 has been showing up now in the morning, which we've still got to look at that one a little bit. It's showing up at 5 of 9. It was showing up at 10 past 9, so we did pick up some time there. It's a struggle right now with Mendon Road. You guys drive Mendon Road, you know we're battling the same thing everybody else is battling.
I don't know if Mr. Fiorillo can talk about this, but what time did your bus get to school? Like, my impression was that that bus 26 gets to school early and has to wait.
Actually, I think.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, if it's getting there early, can it just start the route later? Like, I understand we no, you're shaking your head. Okay.
Quite honestly, my daughter's on that bus. She gets dropped off at McCourt a good 15 minutes early, so that bus can start the community route. And to hear, I'm sorry, with all deference, but for a 4-minute wait, those kids are gonna have to wait 4 minutes.
I didn't know it was 4 minutes.
Have to really schedule the buses to get in there at certain times, or you're going to be back.
Mr. Mitchell, did you want to say something? I didn't mean to talk.
Yes, no, that's okay. I just wanted to mention that I know that there was a concern, with buses arriving before 8:45, I think is the actual time when buses were expected to unload. And, I had a conversation in fact, on the day that Mr. Fiorillo and I did the morning run, we did get there, I believe it was 3 minutes. I think it was 8:42. And I had a conversation with Mrs. Vaughn, and she has responded by, having folks available to supervise students so that they would not have to sit on the bus. So given the fact that we know that bus 26, for example, is the students are on that bus for a significant amount of time, we don't want them to be on the bus longer than they need to be, and arrangements have been made for them to get off the bus as soon as they arrive.
Thank you. I have two more questions. The other one is, have you made any changes to the loading and unloading at community? Last time you were here, we talked about some crazy changes, but have you made any changes?
Right now, it's a very, very efficient load and unload that community. It takes a long time, but to do 2 buses, or I think they may even do 3 at some points in time there. But they're doing it very safely. And to do it any other way would compromise the safety of the scholars. And we're not gonna do that.
Great. I've heard that it's efficient, so I think that's great. And so my final question is, when you put this all in the computer and it comes up with routes, how many buses does it say we need versus how many we actually have?
I can tell you the numbers of buses for each tier. When you say a tier, the high school is 1 tier, the middle school is the 2nd tier, the 1st tier elementary, which are Via and Garvin, and the 3rd tier, and community, Cumberland Hill, and Ashland. The tier that drives your bus count are your middle school. The middle school uses, and I'm only talking large buses, I'm not talking mini buses right now. Middle school uses 24 buses between the 2 middle schools. So that really drives your count, your bus count. You use 21 large buses at the high school, but so you're using 24 at the middle school. Some of the middle school tier uses 24. The middle school tier also counts in 3 Mercy Mount buses because they cannot do, and their Mercy Mount run has to stop before the middle school's even done.
It can't be used for middle school. Yeah.
Or the 1st elementary tier either, because of the drop-off times. So, and then your elementary tiers, the 1st elementary tier uses 14, 2nd elementary tiers use 23. So that's
I guess it's good. We always say that more buses would help, and I'm sure you would agree with that. But we have the number of buses that the computer tells us we need.
right now, yes. You
And by your sense, is that do you agree with the computer?
Yeah, those are accurate counts. The way to the only way you would adjust how many buses that you're going to need with your current enrollment is to open up the gap in between schools, as we spoke about. I mean, you got a 20-minute gap between arrivals, or between the tiers. It's not a lot of time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Goggin, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. I understand that, you said you can't have all the buses arriving at once in the morning and you have to stagger that a little. So I get that, but why would you have the bus with the longest route arriving first? Because I'm looking at the schedule and there are 4 buses that arrive like 8:51, 8:52, 8:53. Why wouldn't that have very short routes? Why would you have the bus with the kids on the bus the longest coming to school the earliest, I guess is my question. Is there any way to help that? I mean, you said it's only 4 minutes, but it could actually be 10 to 15 minutes. Why don't you start other buses earlier then? Okay. My other question is, I have 2 other questions then, I guess. Sorry, we had asked for a report for about a week or 2 of times that buses are arriving at school. Are we getting that? We asked 2 weeks ago, so we could get it soon.
Probably you can have that. I can have that to you by Tuesday morning. We should have it Tuesday morning.
And then with regards to using the Mercy Mount bus, you said it means the kids are on 2 different buses. Why is that right? Why is that a concern that why would that hold it up, I guess?
A lot of times you do not want to use 2 different bus numbers, especially with elementary children, for A and P. Not saying it doesn't happen, because it does happen, but we try to avoid that the most because of the confusion at the school.
And to Mr. Fiorillo's point, there are no other options about making that bus route have less stops going down Diamond Hill or another bus picking up the kids off behind Mercy Mount. There's just no way to do it.
The options of the buses going by Diamond Hill Road, that Diamond Hill Road stuff, those buses are pretty quick because they're doing the West Rentham Road, Pond Road, and the Little Pond Tunnel.
Nevs, so the bus, from what I understand, I'm not sure of the bus number, but Interval Road in Joshua, it backs up instead of making the loop around to Nate Whipple Highway. Are you familiar with that? Can the yes?
I can tell you, they'd have to go all the way into Massachusetts to loop around.
Is that what the bus used to do on that route? No. So the bus can back up? Because I recall that it cannot back up.
Know that they cannot back up, but it's not the best practice to have backup signs. Go ahead.
Mr. Steele, sure, go ahead. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Teal. Any further comment from school committee? Mr. Neves, anything else to add? I'm looking forward to the data coming back in regards to 26 and the follow-up questions that Mrs. Goggin needs answers for in the Times. And, all right, excellent. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell, anything else to add on this? Any update? Sure. All right, thank you.
Nothing further to add, Mr. Chairman.
Next item on the agenda is discussion and/or vote to approve the 2017-2018 school bus routes. I'm going to ask the committee, I'm going to recommend that we table this until we get some more answers in regards to the bus routes, specifically the number 26 and 19 also. So, pleasure of the committee.
I make a motion to table.
Mr. Dennett has a motion on the floor to table the approval of the 2017-2018 bus routes. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Fiorillo. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, new business. 2017 Park Assessment Results Presentation. Is this Mr. D'Amato?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by introducing Kathy Cardoza and Deb Rude, both of whom are curriculum coordinators in my office. Both have
Kathy
served.
and Deb very well. Hello.
Both have served this district, now entering their 29th year here in Cumberland. So I want to thank them for not only what they mean to me, but also the impact that they've had on the lives of children and teachers alike over the past 3 decades, nearly 3 decades. Before we begin this evening's presentation, I feel compelled to share a brief state of sorts regarding our educational and academic standing as a school district. Cumberland School Department, members of the community, teachers, and parents should be very encouraged with the current results for our most recent ELA and mathematics proficiency data. 3 years ago, with the arrival of the Common Core, districts were faced with a great deal of uncertainty on how we, as educators, were going to respond to the rigors of the Common Core, and most significantly, how our educational system was going to prepare students for grade level proficiency in college and career readiness, K-12. In a few moments, my team and I will be centralizing our conversation with all of you around a guiding question. But before we do that, I have some statements I would like to make as it pertains to the sustainability of our performance. To put it plainly, Cumberland has seen a strong trajectory of growth in recent years, both in comparison to ourselves internally and in comparison to neighboring districts. In other words, we are improving, yet we are far from where we want to be. We have set a rigorous goal as a collective body and administration to be a top 5 performing district in the state. While setting lofty goals is imperative, I am a realist, and I want to provide my best educated guess based on what I see trending. We can realistically be a top 6 performing district within the next few years. Cracking the top 5, however, will entail investments on several fronts. This office, among others, are working very hard in auditing current practices in our curricular infrastructures. The bottom line is that through these systems of revision, we uncover gaps and needs. Those needs and gaps require money to fulfill. We need to be able to purchase materials and evidence-based programs to remediate and intervene with learner needs. We have K-2 ELA programmatic struggles that we're trying to repair. May require a complete overhaul. We are doing our due diligence as an office in respecting our fiscal constraints, yet the trajectory of our growth will come to a screeching halt. I'm going to state this again in a different manner. All of the mapping and digging and revising and data work that we do leads to solutions on how we can improve. Some of those solutions will cost money. If we cannot spend money to fix these problems, our data will level off. It's really that simple. Furthermore, as a district, we need to do more to support B.F. Norton and McCourt Middle School, respectively. We need to start thinking outside the box on how to support the teams of educators there in order to improve the performance levels of those students. Overall, our district data will never statistically enter the top 5 status unless we do more for those schools. We as a district need to decide what type of school system we want. What do we value? In my view, we are soon going to face a point of inertia, much like a roller coaster gaining momentum as it rises to the peak. Yet at that peak it pauses, hesitates, and then begins a decline. We must be committed to intercepting that decline. We cannot engage in the wrong conversations. We have to add coaches, keep our salaries competitive so that we attract top-notch leadership. We have to invest monies in new models that support BF and McCourt and all of our other schools. Standardized test scores are the reality by which we are judged, good, bad, or indifferent. People choose where they want to live based on these proficiency levels. Though there may be many that do not value their worth, those proficiency scores do matter. Our scores warrant applause because the teachers and principals in our schools maintain a focus in times of fiscal challenges. Our strategic plan will hold 3-year targets for all of our schools to meet as it relates to performance. So with that being said, I would like to transition to our presentation by asking us all to reflect on the same question I posed just a few moments ago. What is the type of school district we want to collectively seek? Because the product that we are able to provide you will be directly related to the way that we are able to fund the gaps and needs we uncover. I do not want to be in a position 2 years from now answering questions as to why our data and growth has leveled off without stating publicly this evening that I am forecasting this to be a certainty should we not come together to make sure that we have the money we need to support student academic achievement. I conclude with a quote from leadership guru Simon Sinek. He states that we cannot have innovation and efficiency concurrently. In fact, innovation is anything but efficient. So, with that being said, we will begin our park presentation. The first few slides are just reviews of park by definition. I won't read it to you. You can certainly read it on your own, but I wanted to provide that to all of you. The second slide, or the next slide in the presentation, goes over the actual performance levels. The percentages that you'll be viewing this evening are both levels 4 and 5, which illustrate demonstration of student proficiency within our district. Again, levels 4 and 5. So in my initial address, I had mentioned that we were going to frame this presentation around a guiding question. That guiding question is, based on the 3 years of park performance, how has Cumberland responded to the rigors of the Common Core state standards? So we go to the next slide. What we wanted to do is illustrate our rankings within the state. And I'm going to share a few tidbits, and Kathy and Deb are going to begin joining in. But the headline, I think, says a lot. Top 26% in performance in the state, bottom 10% in funding when these assessments were administered to our students. If you look at the rankings, we currently rank 9th in the state in both ELA performance and math performance. And I think that that is a tremendous feat, and I'll tell you why. Over the past 3 years, we went from ranking the first year of Park, we went from ranking in the top 50%, 17th out of 34 districts. And now we've cut that in half in just 3 years. If you look, if we can stay on that slide, please. If you look at the percentage points that separate us from ranking higher, we are 1 percentage point from ranking in the top 7 in the ELA. We are just 0.4 points away from Portsmouth in terms of performance in math. We are 0.8 percentage points away from ranking in the top 7. That's a very, very small number of students when you think about, populous data. Is there anything that you guys want to add?
This one's working. Oh, we'll pass this, thanks. In terms of ELA, I think it'll be interesting for you to hear what districts we outperformed this year that we didn't outperform in 16-17. So we outperformed in 2017 in ELA Lincoln, Smithfield, Blackstone Valley Prep, Narragansett, and Portsmouth. So that took us from 13th to 9th in ELA.
In math, we maintained the ninth position from last year to this year. And some of the schools, one of the schools that we outperformed was BVP, and then I believe it was, I'm not sure which school that brought us to the same position. So we did better than one, and then one moved ahead. But we are still within 1 percentage point between number 7 and number 9.
If you just, one last thing on this slide, we included free and reduced lunch percentages because that seems to be always a part of the conversation. So we wanted to include that so you could see that comparatively to the districts who are performing better than we are. But again, ranking in the top 10, 9 specifically, up in ELA from 13 last year, cut it in half in 3 years from 50% to top 26%. I think that's pretty amazing growth.
So now let's take a look at Cumberland performance in comparison to the state. As you can see, the state performance remained flat between 16 and 17, and small growth over their 3-year trend. In contrast, Cumberland has experienced steady growth. 7-point gain between 16 and 17, and a 12-point gain over the 3-year period.
Notice a similar thing in math. You can see that there's a small increase in the state performance. In the first column of the state, it was 25%. That's why it doesn't show up on there. But if you look at the trajectory of growth for Cumberland, it's a slope. It's a steady increase each year, up 7% in year 1 and 4% in year 2 for an overall gain of 11%.
So now let's take a look at the district at the different levels. The left column is elementary, middle is middle school, and then the far right is high school. So in the elementary, the growth 9% over the 3-year period. And when you look at middle school ELA, it was the fastest growing level and has made the most growth. 17-point gain over the 3-year period. When you disaggregate that by school, last year McCourt grew by 8 points with a 3-year gain over 8-point gain over the 3 years. North Cumberland Middle, 13 points last year, with a growth of 23 points over 3 years. The high school, 5 points over the 3 years, and I think same performance level between 16 and 17.
Math is set up the same way. In elementary, maintained, they were consistent over the last 2 years, but had an increase over the 3 years. Consistent gains in middle school with a total of 12% over 3 years, and consistent gains in high school. And again, if you look at the big gains in middle school, we had 12% gains at North Cumberland Middle School and 7% gains at McCourt. So that was pretty significant, and 11% district-wide.
Were these the slides you just referenced? Okay, Mike, the next, you can go to the next one. Okay, that one.
Nope, we're heading back. Okay, right, we're right here. So on this particular slide, I want to have you all pay particular attention. Just overall, we wanted to provide you with the school. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but we wanted to provide you the 3-year trends for all of our schools. We also included the elementary, middle school, and overall district growth in ELA. On the next slide, we provide you the same in math, all of the schools, elementary, middle school, and district, with the 3-year gains, and all of the news is positive. We decided to, on this particular slide, we wanted to include, we get lots of questions about how our performance compares to BVP, so we thought we'd just get ahead of the questions and provide you with the data just so that you have it. We provided their 3-year performance in ELA versus ours. I have a graphic that actually shows the growth. If you just go one over, we provide you the, yeah, thank you. So this particular graphic, I like to show things visually to show rate of growth. In the far left, in 2015, 0.0, which is where the 49% is where BVP was performing the first year that Park was administered. And we were, as you can see, operating at about 6% less proficiency than they were. And you can see what the 3-year trend has been as a district over the past 3 years in relation to BVP. This is respective to ELA. In math, we provide you the statistics again, but if Mike, you roll to the next slide, we once again provide you that trajectory of growth. 48% being their starting point in year 1. We were 11 percentage points beneath their performance, and over the past 3 years, we have a nice trending slope.
So what you're seeing here is the 6 northern Rhode Island districts with similar SES status, a demographic determined by the number of students on free and reduced lunch. Cumberland outperformed all districts except North Smithfield. And as I said previously, we can feel great about this being the first year that we've outperformed Lincoln, Smith, and Smithfield in northern Rhode Island in the ELA portion of Park.
In math, if we look at the same neighboring communities with a similar SES, Cumberland was the highest performing district in the whole northern part of the state.
Okay, so on this particular slide, what we basically are trying to illustrate is you know, with the implementation of SRSD and evidence-based practice that we've worked so hard on in the district. Its inception started at BF Norton and has since grown and is continuing to grow in our district. We wanted to show the relationship graphically between our performance level in ELA overall with the written expression subclaim. And what we tried to do is the arrows that are pointing, if you can kind of think of the top line sort of being a magnet and pulling up the bottom line, the lines are relatively parallel and look similar. And the reason for that is because we've paid quite a bit of attention to written expression, comprehension work, and students, their writing subclaims. And we have seen a relationship, a strong relationship between the work that we're doing and investing in and the results that we're receiving.
And to, if you could just go back to that one, yeah, and to follow up a little bit on SRSD, the question would be, well, why has this meta approach resulted in such clear data that shows growth and in a relationship to the performance level? Well, I think Mr. DeMona referenced it. It's an evidence-based approach, which means that there are over 100 research studies that have looked at its positive effect on student achievement. And in addition, SRSD embodies the 4 major learning theories that have been developed over the last 50 years. There's only 4: explicit instruction, strategy instruction, gradual release of a responsibility, and feedback, informative assessment.
So what we wanted to do is provide you with last year's action steps. We wanted to revisit those just really quickly and just give you sort of the check marks on things that we either have accomplished or are in progress. Many of them are being worked on and in progress, and we're just going to take turns sort of commenting on these. If you look at the first piece, with the expansion of when we look at this office, our goal is to increase schools' capacities to understand and use PARC data with a focus on subclaim analysis and its impact on curriculum. This was written when this office was 4 curriculum coordinators. It has since been reduced down to 2. But we are still maintaining a focus and working with principals on this particular piece. It will continue when we switch over to RICAS.
We've done a pretty in-depth analysis of grade level, school, and district data based on last year's PARC results. We look for trends. We look to see if there are grade level concerns with the curriculum, district level concerns. Then we ask ourselves, do we need to make curricula shifts based on the data? And if we see consistent, a standard that students are consistently across grade level having difficulty with, we go back and look at the curriculum. We see where it's taught, when it's taught, and if we need to make changes to our curriculum. So based on the analysis last year, we did make some changes to just a few 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and we're picking up where we left off on the first professional development day on October 6th, continuing that work and making the changes to our curriculum.
When you look at the second item, we're looking at the ELA revision, and that's going on in grades K through 8. They're examining the programs they use, CKLA and expeditionary learning. And historically in Cumberland, we've taught programs, not standards or developing curricular framework. So the goals of our work and all the teams, there are 3. One is deepening teachers' understanding of standards, and then determining how to teach these standards deliberately and intentionally. And that's a huge shift for us. But teachers are rising to the challenge of doing that work. Number 2, we're creating common assessments around standards of emphasis. There have been common assessments in programs, but they have not been used the same in all schools. So now we come to the table and we talk about if we're teaching standards deliberately and intentionally, and we develop a common assessment, we can agree from BF Norton to NCMS that these common assessments are going to be a way of measuring proficiency. Lastly, we are identifying, and I think Mr. DeMona referred to this, the gaps that exist in our program, and we're determining how they can be fixed and if they can be revised. Number 5, we're looking at continuing to roll out SRSD, And our goal this year is to build school-based sustainability. There are 17 elementary and middle school teachers who are serving as teacher leaders, meeting monthly with Dr. Leslie Laud to grow their leadership so they can serve as school-based experts. In addition, Dr. Leslie Laud will be meeting regularly with principals to build their capacity during some of Mr. Mitchell's leadership team meetings.
I just want to mention too, we're still a Thinking Maps district, but it's the 4th year of Thinking Maps implementation. So right now we're just training new hires and giving them the professional development and support they need so that we can continue with Thinking Maps.
We addressed number 6, auditing our intervention infrastructure, with the recent hire of Nicole Bucca, who is a well-known response to intervention guru in the state. She's traveled nationally. She is very well versed in this area, so she's been a welcome addition to our team, and she is currently in progress with auditing our intervention infrastructures, meeting with principals. In fact, tomorrow she's doing a training with our elementary principals. She is providing them with a plethora of information. We have a whole professional development infrastructure built in by having her as part of our team. So it's an efficient hire, I think, one that will bring quite a bit of good to students that are in need in our district.
Number 7 looks at spending time in schools where scores have increased in math and ELA. So now that we have 3 years of PARC data that measure how we've responded to the rigor of the Common Core, Kathy and I both want to visit Cumberland classrooms who have demonstrated strong PARC results. And since all teachers use the same programs, what we want to uncover is what is happening in these classrooms to account for these outstanding results. Practices such as how they use their time, how they develop student engagement, and how they differentiate. And a little anecdote is I met with a teacher who is an astounding educator and gets amazing results year after year. And she made a statement that sounded simple. She said, "I have high expectations for all my students." And I said, well, that's a catchphrase, but I want to sit in your classroom to see how you're creating scaffolds and supports to get kids there.
So with that being said, we have a new set of action steps that we are focusing our attention on. The first 2 are just a carryover from last year's. Time is of the essence, and it sometimes impedes our ability to get to other schools demographically in our area, but we definitely want to do more of that. Look at performance levels in schools that are doing really well, and visit their systems, understand how they're approaching their instructional practices, and bring those things to our students and our systems. Number 3, this year is a huge project that's on my plate, one that I'm spending a lot of time being thoughtful about, and working with some tremendous educators at the high school, we're revising our standards-based grading practices. This is a journey. It is definitely not a sprint, and it impacts reporting and policy. So more to come on that.
Okay, so number 4, when we look at John Hattie's work of creating a culture focusing on teacher impact on student learning, John Hattie is a researcher whose work centers around the influence of achievement. He has looked at and called over 800 meta-studies covering over more than 80 million kids. He developed a way of ranking various influences related to learning and achievement. And Hattie's work for us this year in the district serves as the guiding force framing our SRSD leadership work. His factor that influences student achievement the most is called collective efficacy. which means teachers working together with a shared focus on analyzing student learning. And what's interesting about that, we usually come to the table and we look at teaching practices and we share teaching practices as educators. This is a shift. We are coming to the table and we're going to be looking at student learning, writing, and we're going to say to teachers who have made great growth, what did you do to grow your kids in that area? What were your teaching practices? So it's a mindset shift.
Number 5 on the action steps says we're going to audit and revise the math assessment and rubric system. This is going to go on K-8. We're starting at the middle school. We want to ensure that we have authentic grading practices for student performance so that we're assessing and aligning grades to the actual performance of the standards. We want to make sure our rubrics are aligned to the standards and that there's consistency across schools, across the district. We also last year created some interim assessments that students will be taking this year that will give them a chance to be assessed on a second time on the standard. They'll be given 3 times a year, and they're common assessments throughout the district, so we can use that also to look at how we're teaching the standards and if we need to make changes to our curriculum.
So in grades 9 through 12, last year this work had begun, and teachers and content leaders were analyzing their own common assessments at the high school within their respective content areas. They're looking at the assessment rigor, and they're having cross-content conversations about analyzing these assessments. The challenge at the high school has always been, what do we measure our internal assessments against? At the grades 3 through 8, we have PARC, we have RICAS. We can measure what we're doing in the classroom and measure it against a different measure, a standardized measure. At the high school, we'll be turning to PSAT and SAT scores, mean scores, scale scores in reading, writing, and mathematics. And the reason why we're going to be doing that, we're going to be setting targets within our strategic plan. The high school will be responsible for setting 3-year targets in those areas to demonstrate growth, that we're growing kids. That's great that we have common assessment things happening. We have conversations happening within the structures of our content areas, but we need to measure that growth in some other way, and we're going to turn to PSAT and SAT scores to be able to do that.
So number 7 talks about the shift as we move from PARC to RICAS, and the headline is simple: same standards and similar assessment. At the end of your slide presentation, we provided you with a link of the presentation we shared with the Achievement Subcommittee last May, describing the overall similarities and differences. And when you go to that link, slide 7 and 9 will describe differences and similarities in math and ELA. But the 5 differences that apply to both math and ELA are: 1, less testing in certain grade levels; 2, the overall standard is being assessed in RICAS, where in PARC it was subparts of each standard were tested and reported out. Number 3, the PARC test items will be phased out over time because Mass is creating their own test bank of items that will still reflect the Common Core standards, but it will be, as we understand, less expensive for them to have their own bank of items. In addition, both Mass and Rhode Island assessments will be scored by the same Mass teams. However, the scores for each state will be disaggregated. So Rhode Island will get, our scores, and Mass will get their scores. A downside, I think, in terms of efficiency, currently we get our preliminary PARC data in July, so we're ready to be here with you, and Mr. Mitchell and Tony can bring this to their leadership retreat in August. But it is our understanding we will not receive the RIDECAST reports until September.
Okay, number 8 is that we're going to develop a compacted math curriculum for middle school students. And this would be a compacted math curriculum just for the higher end learners. The plan is starting this year, all sixth graders are grouped heterogeneously. So when they come from fifth grade into sixth, and then at the end of sixth grade, based on their performance and several factors, including the interim assessments, some students will go into a compacted track, so they would receive instruction in 7th and 8th grade standards during 7th grade, so that when they go to 8th grade, they are ready for pre-algebra. In the past, they would go from grade 7 math to pre-algebra and never took grade 8, and they were noticing that there were some gaps. So they'll still obviously not do all of 7 and all of 8, but we're going to combine, look for similar standards and look at the expectation of the 8th grade standard and cover that in 7th grade. And we talked a lot about that at the Achievement Subcommittee. There is strict criteria about the students that will be in that track.
So as we look at the next one, we're talking about an independent reading system that's being implemented at NCMS in McCourt. This occurred because both middle schools have restructured their schedule, creating time to implement an independent reading block. The American Reading Company, which is the material and the programs we're going to be using, they've developed a system of independent reading that includes identifying each student's independent reading level using a one-on-one assessment, and then a teaching framework that includes conferencing and something called accountable talk. So kids will be responsive to each other and then to the class. The beauty of this, these materials is that they are beautiful texts that are systematically leveled, and kids are being put into the level at which they need to learn maybe more about genre expansion, encourage kids to read different genres, and simply have kids finish texts. So we had one day of training with Dr. Emily Townsend from Atlanta, who's excellent, and she is coming back in on the 17th and 18th to spend a day at McCourt and a day at NCMS. I have to say anecdotally, the teachers, many of the teachers I spoke with are thrilled that this is happening, because kids with the Common Core State Standards are reading text because at a higher level because of the Lexile band, and a strategy called close reading has to be the one employed as you work through this more complex text. What has been lost is independent reading, and also, you know, this will be an opportunity for them not to be on Chromebooks, but to be using authentic text. The goal of this year for both schools is to build a culture of reading and to build student reading stamina as kids move through different genres of books that they choose.
Lastly, number 10, implement and monitor blended learning in the district to see if there is a positive impact. And blended learning has been going on, but throughout last year, teachers, we called it the Lighthouse teachers, went to 5 days of training in blended learning. Blended learning is the combination of in-person instruction and technology that enables more personalized learning and more differentiation. It's meant to be engaging and relevant and hopefully reach all learners. So throughout the year, now that the Lighthouse teachers have been trained, they're going to share the knowledge they gained with the other teachers in the district. So starting on October 6th in the afternoon at both elementary and middle school, we're having something called a tech conference. And these teachers that went through the training have volunteered to facilitate sessions both at the elementary and the middle school so that they can spread the knowledge that they gained throughout. And then the hope is that we will measure the impact to see if it's had a positive impact, because that's our goal this year, the word impact.
So just to conclude, we typically like to include some Massachusetts districts in terms of our performance. Their scores, to my understanding, have not been released to this point. So that's why we don't have that data. But when they are released, we will look at some similar districts with similar demographics, and we'll pull some Massachusetts data and see how we've done in comparison to some of the Massachusetts schools. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. So I do have a couple questions. I don't know if any school committee member does, but I look forward to having you back so we can compare the Massachusetts scores to our scores. So going through that second segment on the link, the ELA Park RICAS, the similarities and the differences, less testing. Can you expand on that a little bit? I like how Tony passed it over to you. Yeah.
All right. In certain grade levels, there are going to be fewer units of testing. It won't be fewer units of testing for all students, but there will be in middle school ELA and math, there's going to be fewer units or sessions. Yep.
Also, so fewer essays, but volume of writing per essay increases. So they
Yeah.
want more content.
So, yeah, so what's happening is Park kids had to respond to 3 different types of writing. They would have a narrative session, a LAT, literature analysis, and then a informational. So they're tricking us. What we know is going to happen in RICAS is they're going to always have a narrative. So that doesn't mean kids are writing from their head. That means it's always evidence-based. So kids are reading paired text, and then they're either extending the story, telling it from a different character's point of view. And I would say we're vulnerable this year regarding that because Mass has, prior to MCAS Next Generation, they just had MCAS, and that was an open written response. And that open written response was narrative. So, you know, they're driving the bus. We're jumping on their bus. And that's why certain decisions need to be made, important decisions, as we move forward this year and next year in our ELA revision in terms of how we're going to give kids more opportunity to respond to narrative.
Excellent. A couple more quick questions and then something else to say. Last year for Park, we had to purchase headphones. Is that what it was? What did we purchase?
The initial year that Park came out, we needed to purchase headphones.
We need to purchase. Okay, even for RICAS, we need to make a purchase.
It's still the TestNav platform.
And then also, I did want to say it wouldn't be a meeting with Ray Salvatore if I didn't have to say something about BVP in Cumberland schools. I was looking at a document that Mr. Pregano had put together. So BVP has 28 administrators. We have 22. We have 3 additional schools than they have and over 3,000 additional students. And we've increased our test scores. So, and I believe we gave this to the mayor's blue ribbon committee, right, Mr. Pregano? Crickets in the room. But, okay, thank you. Does any school committee member have something to say? Mrs. Friedman?
First of all, I want to say congratulations on these results. And secondly, as a new school committee member and a member of the Achievement Subcommittee, I know I've said this to you in our subcommittee meetings, but I am so impressed with the rigor and the data-driven decisions that you make. And I know most people in town have no idea of how you really approach this and analyze and make curriculum and make all your decisions, your curriculum, your teacher development decisions, all based on actual real data and where you want to go with it. So that is just something that I continue to be impressed with. I do have a question, and I have a question. I might be embarrassed that I don't know the answer, but I have the question, which is, and I know things are changing, but as we look at the high school scores, how would you explain the difference in the Park results for the high school, because I'm not sure that they match up. I know we're going to be looking at PSATs and SAT scores as a benchmark for that, it doesn't seem to be level, where our SAT scores may be up here more and our park results are down here more. How would you explain that?
Actually, I don't mean to put you on the spot because you are my boss. It's the superintendent, but you have a theory on that, so that you speak about.
Well, first of all, Mrs. Friedman, your point is well taken. The performance of our students over the last couple of years, when they move at the middle level, when they move to the high school level, it's just not logical that they're not performing as well as they should be based on the data that we saw at the middle level. And I know that you've heard me say this before, and you know, one of the tenets of our strategic plan is no excuses, only results. So that notwithstanding, I do believe that in order for students to put forth their best effort, it has to mean something. And I've said this many times. I've had high school students say to me, when I was both an assistant principal and a principal for 12 years in the high school, I've had students say to me before taking an assessment, does this mean anything? And they all know that the park did not have any, carry any weight on graduation, on college entrance opportunities, those kinds of things. So, and this sort of thing is meaningful to me. I actually asked to speak. I just randomly, I asked the main office at the high school to randomly select 25 students, not just, you know, the high performing, the students who we know are high performing, conscientious students, but all students in grades, you know, 9, 10, and 11. And I brought them to the superintendent's conference room, and we had a conversation about assessment. And I said that federal law requires all students to be assessed in grades 3 through 10. So you are required to do an assessment. If you had a choice between the park or the PSAT and or the SAT, what would be your choice? Not one student, not one, supported park. They all said that that they would certainly support the PSAT and the SAT, and because it has meaning to all of us, and it has forever. So I believe we're going to get a more accurate assessment of how our students are performing with the new assessments that they're using at the high school. So the bottom line for me, I'm not convinced that the scores that we see at the high school are a true measure of what our students know and are able to do.
So to look at your theory, I'd be interested in seeing the results from other districts at the high school level for their park results and their SAT results, and see, do we see that kind of trend happening elsewhere too? So, okay, thank you.
I just have one question. Do we have any data showing the correlation between our internal grading standards and park, so we can see how those two relate?
Building those systems, it's a complex question, because you have a system that was developed initially when the standards-based grading initiative was rolled out here. Report cards were created. The assessment infrastructure was in place through these programs. What we're doing is we're kind of tearing these pieces apart in order to rebuild them again. So we have, in pockets in certain schools, looked at it. I know McCourt did do an analysis last year. Dr. Masterson had mentioned to me that he did see a correlation between student grades that were going on report cards and park results. But the authenticity of grading is something that we have to focus on in our in our schools and in our practices. Inter-rate or reliability are things that we have to look at. That's why it's so important to have those external measures. But I would say that it's a system that is still being looked at very, very closely. It's something that we're going to be doing at the high school and working our way backwards.
Thank you. And then just to circle back to what you opened with, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would it be fair to say that in your considered professional opinion, that without sustained financial investment in the district, we can expect growth to either level off or perhaps even decline?
Without question.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Denon?
The first thing I want to do was echo Mrs. Friedman's comments. I was going to say exactly what you said at the beginning of your comments. I think the district did a great job on Park this past year, and I think it's a testament to all of your hard work and the hard work of the teachers across the district and the students too, who work really hard. I went to the North Cumberland open house a few days ago, and I think every classroom on the walls were thinking maps, and they were mentioned by every teacher. SRSD was mentioned by most teachers, even not ELA teachers, but other teachers who are incorporating it. So I think I know we're pushing coaches for SRSD. You clearly have teachers who are on board, I think, which is a wonderful thing, and the results speak for themselves. I have a question about, and so we in the achievement subcommittee, we talked a lot about math at the middle schools and algebra in particular. And one thing that sticks out to me is and I'm looking at it here, but we had 148 students take the algebra test in 8th grade. BVP had 0. So I'm just wondering, and maybe you can't answer this now, but is this a diverging opinion on whether 8th graders should take Algebra 1 or algebra? Can you tackle that now? Or?
So, can you repeat the actual crux of the question?
Well, the crux of the question is we're having a lot of kids take algebra in 8th grade. BVP, which is a school from scratch, supposedly, has 0. So what's your sense of that?
It's hard to say. I mean, when I came into this position, I mean, perhaps Mr. Mitchell could provide more historical information on this, but to me, it's always been, a common practice, even in districts that I've been in before I came here. Algebra 1 at the 8th grade level was not atypical necessarily. It was an option. I'm not so sure why BVP may have the philosophy of.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to answer. I just didn't know if there's discussion and research out there about this, about pushing kids for algebra in 8th grade, and also I think it skews some of the results, because if you have a group of kids taking algebra and another group of kids taking regular 8th grade, you're talking about apples and oranges when you're comparing districts.
Excellent point.
That's all.
Yep. Yeah. We can certainly look into the research behind that. Sure.
Thank you.
Mrs. Friedman?
Just to add on to the question I think you asked previously about the budget, the note that I made here as we enter, won't be that long before we're entering budget season again, is for us to be able to categorize the expenditures that would be directly related to student achievement and supporting student achievement. And so just to, kind of start thinking about that now, so we can be clear kind of what we're looking at and what is supporting what. And I think that's going to be really important for us.
We will be prioritizing.
Excellent. Mr. DeMonica.
I'd like to just say that I think the POC results are great over the 3 years. How much can you attribute to the math interventionists that may have been brought in 3 years ago? These 2 women over here, we threw a monkey in the wrench 3 years ago and amended the budget on the floor, and we added the interventionist and things like that. Have they helped? Have they not helped? Do you need more? I mean,
it's a great question. So those are capacity enhancing resources that I briefly referred to when in my opening statement, I mentioned coaches, interventionist coaches. Expanding our web as when we have 2 people working in this office, it's really hard to extend to 450 teachers in all of the different content areas, all the different systems. So to answer your question, have they helped? Absolutely, 100%. They're helping remediate and help students close gaps in meeting, these grade level standards. When the Common Core came out, rigor went up. Achievement inversely goes down when that happens. So interventionists came in at the right point to help stave that decline for those kids. So it's a tremendous addition. Do we need more? I would say yes, we do. Do we need coaches and to look more towards a coaching model where you have coaches in schools that have a role specific to working with teacher practice, with teachers intimately? It's a role that I sort of morphed Deb's role at BF Thornton in our last year there as a coach more than an interventionist, because I wanted her to impact more than 36 kids, 6 kids a period. As an interventionist, I wanted her expertise to impact more students. So that strategy, I think, can make an impact on kids. And those are the things that I'm referring to. If we're not able as an office to innovate and put resources in schools like McCourt and think differently about how we support BF Thornton and our other schools, then, our district is not going to grow. Statistically, it's not possible. Maybe some growth will be possible, but eventually we will peak. It's just going to happen.
Mr. Salvatore, if I may. I'm sorry, was there something else you wanted to say, Mr. Monica?
I did want to go back to the elementary schools. You had mentioned that not all the schools are kind of working together there with the standards. Is that correct?
Working together with the standards?
The testing, I guess, isn't aligned together, so what one school's doing, the other school's not doing, the teachers, did I miss that? I'd have to look at the slide to find the right answer, but I'll ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make what I feel is a critically important point. There's no question that, there are certain students who need more academic support, and we would all, I think, agree with that. But the point that I think is, at least from my perspective, based on my experience and my professional reading, in fact, we all as an administrative team read, I forget exactly what the title of the document was, but not this past retreat. It might not have even been the one before, but within the last 3 retreats that we had, we'd read a document on the characteristics of the most successful or effective school systems in the world. And there are some in this country, but it also included, systems like Singapore and Finland and those kinds of things. And there were, believe it or not, like just a few very consistent characteristics that were consistent across all of these high-performing systems in the world. And one of them, and this is the thing that stands out most in my mind, one of them was they all use a great deal of coaching. And when you think about the data that was provided by Tony, Deb, and Kathy, they talk. We know that there are teachers who do an outstanding job of getting their students to grow academically over the course of a school year. We know who those teachers are, and we also know the teachers who need some additional support. So what if we had a system where we provide an opportunity for these outstanding teachers who we know move student performance more than anybody else? How beneficial would it be for those teachers to coach on a regular basis those teachers who have the potential to be doing better, or the expectation is that they're doing better? But that gets back to Tony's opening remarks, and that to me is critically important. If we're going to move this district, really move this district, not to be in the top 5, but to be near the tippity top, we need more support in those particular areas. And I guarantee you that if we know who the master teachers are, if we provide an opportunity for those master teachers to provide professional development to teachers in the classroom on a daily basis, we're going to get better. So the point I wanted to make was that's a great example of how additional resources will help us. The best systems in the world have high expectations for their staff and their students. They provide coaching opportunities their staff, and they identify great teachers and nurture great teachers, right? While in college, and recruit them to teach in their systems. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mitchell, excellent overview on that. And I would like to add that I recently, in my position, the company I work for, I attended a sales meeting in Cleveland, and we had people from corporate come in. The best results that we achieve in a sales organization is coaching. So we do give a presentation to a large group, but I'm required to, and it gets results. When you can individually coach someone, you can expect growth within your sales organization. So I'm a big fan of coaching. Any other questions from the school committee? Councilwoman Bolio, would you have a please step up to the microphone? We entertain your thoughts. Just take charge. Name and address for the record, Mrs. Bolio. No. Yeah, Deb's is working, yeah. No. One out of three.
Third time's a charm. Thought I was going to get the hook. So thank you. Great presentation. I'm going to move over because I just have to say that having been involved in this for 14 or 15 years and watching so many changes and so many remarks about we'll get there, things are going to get better, you're actually figuring out how to operationalize it. And it took a little bit, but we're there, and it's moving, and the needle's moving finally, and it's moving for a system. It's not just moving in a class or school. It sounds like the remarks you made, Assistant Superintendent Damana, about having to kind of rethink some of the way we deliver instruction for schools like McCourt and BF Norton. I can't wait to hear more about that, because if you're able to do what, we rarely would have here's where our goals were last year, here's where they are this year. This is what we checked off for the boxes. Here's where our gaps are. We still know we need to work on that. You're moving it, and we have to continue to move those pieces forward. So I'm excited to hear, what the next steps are for all the schools in the district. In addition to that, I wanted to add, just thinking about like how this applies to me at work. And Chairman Salvatore, you talked about coaching. We do a lot of coaching at work, and we have small projects, medium projects, and then you have these mammoth projects. And the mammoth projects aren't just like 10 times the size of the first project. It has like an infrastructure. And if you're going to move the district forward, you need the infrastructure. And it seems to me like your project is sized for a small project, but you're having to deliver for a large project. And so at the level and layer that you're doing all of this work, you can see there's, you're going 1,000 miles an hour, and the district's responding to it. It seems to me like you don't have enough to fundamentally move it forward. Never mind the funding part of it. You just don't have the capacity to get it. I'd love to hear more about what you'd like to do with McCourt and North. I think, whether there's a elevator speech on that tonight, or we can have, I can attend an achievement subcommittee committee meeting on that. I'd like to hear a lot more about that. And I think for me, questions we always ask at work are, what are your biggest blockers? Obviously money's there, but if we took some of that away, what would be the first thing you'd be able to do, if there, not if money was no object, but if we really could say we need to commit resources to these two big or three big buckets, what would those be? Thanks for everybody's time.
Mrs. Bolio, thank you for the input. It's nice to see you show up at the meeting so energized and excited.
So I'll try to respond as best I can and as briefly as I can. So to the piece about McCourt and BF Norton, I have lots of different ideas, but I think in fairness to the leaders in those buildings, in those respective buildings, I'd be glad to do some work with them and share my ideas and have them come in and we can collectively talk about things that, and strategies that we've discussed. Just off the top of my head, really simple things. I think you need to stabilize those two schools. Having been a principal at BF Norton, I can speak through experience that the environment needs to be stabilized in order for teaching and learning to happen. And in those schools, we just have higher rates of behavioral issues. We have higher transiency in those particular schools. So you need to stabilize the environment. That's number one. And how do you do that? Yeah, I could have used a vice principal to help me stabilize the environment so I could focus on the teaching and learning. I think McCourt would benefit from two vice principals in that school, to be perfectly honest with you, so that Dr. Masterson could focus on the teaching and learning aspects of that school's needs. Those are just really simple. Another layer is teaching and learning in those schools. There's a lot of students are arriving in those schools with deficiencies, and they're coming there without having preschool at the elementary level. They're going there with gaps, right? Whereas to me, I always talk about distance equals rate times time. When you're at community, you've been students that go there, they go to preschool. They're coming in with a different background and a different sort of starting point. So how do we close that? How do we do that? What I would love to see is instituting coaches there within that team and having sort of those coaches be an extension of this office. That sort of you sort of create for BF Norton and McCourt almost like they're their own sort of city within a city of sorts. So they're connected to us. They're still following district expectations. They're still following the things in the Common Core standards, our curriculum. But we have sort of more on-site people who are supporting the work, sort of that large structural piece that you're talking about in terms of capacity to help those schools achieve. I think professional development needs to be looked at a little bit differently. So I'll end with this. I am very interested in having those two schools be research-based schools. And what I mean by that is I've reached out to Rhode Island College. We've had some conversations around having those schools really focus their professional development on what we know works through John Hattie's work and developing a whole professional development infrastructure around his 8 mind frames, looking at how we professionally develop those teachers differently, having different conversations in those classrooms. And when I say different, that may scare people. Why different? Why can't we do it in all schools? You have to start somewhere. And why not those two schools? So those are just some really superficial, brief things that I would change immediately. What was the other question that you had? I think you had mentioned it. In those two respective schools, or just overall? I'd probably say, let's see, top 3 resources. I would say that I would want to use Nicole's audit to better understand where we are as a district in terms of how we're remediating sort of the belly of the bell curve. So in other words, that middle population, that tier 2 population of students who we can't seem to get to that level of proficiency. Based on that audit, what are the things that we know work, and let's invest in those things to help get those kids to proficiency. That would be number 1. That may be in the form of evidence-based programs that we may have to buy that we know work for tier 2 students who are struggling, which we don't have in place. Maybe a second thing that I would look at again is looking at how we structure our interventionists and leaders within the building. We've got to help principals be academic leaders, and in order for them to be academic leaders, we need to provide people in their buildings to help them with some of the intangible things that are happening. And that takes people. That takes smart people that know what they're doing. And I would love to see an expansion of this office, because we can do so much more if not just my resources here, I mean expansion of this office within the schools. So having a coordinator infrastructure with coaches that are pods in schools sort of working off, so that gives us the opportunity to do the more research and stay ahead of the infrastructure in the big system, if that makes sense. That's like off the top of my head quickly. All right.
Mr. Demont, I think you just created 5 action items that are now
Probably,
going to
yeah.
be moved to Mr. Denon chairing the achievement. So I see him typing away over here. So our agenda's full. Okay. All right. Anyone else? Excellent content. Mrs. Teal. Oh, Mr. DeMonica.
I just want to say one thing. This last year, we used $1.2 million of one-time money just for a budget fix. And Mr. Demana talks about, having the resources and the money. We've got to find a revenue stream that works with the town, because Mr. Prignano is looking for a 4% just to get us near the state average. And without money, we're never going to get there to provide the services. But $1.2 million this year for last year.
Thank you. Mrs. Teal. Nice to have you at our meeting.
Thank you. I just have a few quick comments. One, I want to say congratulations to the district, congratulations to the school committee for making good strategic decisions. Congratulations to the administrators for their hard work, the teachers who believe in the students, and the students who have risen to the challenge of performing better. And I think one of the most important things that was said was about raising expectations for students. And I think the more that we raise our expectations for how well our students can do, the more that we'll be amazed at how high they can go. And I think it's so refreshing to hear that we want to raise expectations for students, because for far too long I've heard that, oh, it's Cumberland, or, one excuse after another excuse of why we can't have a higher bar for our students. And we do have a higher bar, and the students are performing, and we're seeing results of that. So thank you very much. And apparently that's the end of the meeting.
There's a hook coming out, Mrs. Teal. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? We're good. Next item on the agenda, discussion and/or vote to approve Superintendent's 2017/18 goals. Mr. Denon spearheading this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we know, we have a policy A2, which is evaluation of the superintendent. And that policy lays out a calendar for each year for setting goals and doing a review of the superintendent's performance against those goals. So we're at the time in the calendar where we need to set the goals for the coming year. And we had some discussion about this as part of the review, the superintendent's review for the past year. And we've come up with 3 goals that we've agreed upon with the superintendent. And I'm talking like he's not here, but hi, Mr. Mitchell. And what I'd like to do, so I'm just going to read the goals, because part of the policy is to make the goals public. So the first goal is begin implementation of the district's 3-year strategic plan and hold the district accountable for implementing the plan. Now, I just want to elaborate on that, because the strategic plan is something that we approved, I think at the last meeting or maybe the meeting before. It's chock full of stuff to do. So I think by saying we're going to begin implementation of the district's 3-year strategic plan, we're putting a lot on the superintendent's plate already. Okay, so I think we all understand that, but I wanted to just state it for the record that it includes many things that we know will take 3 years to accomplish. But what we're saying here is we're going to get going right away. And I think Mr. Mitchell has said that he's already started. There are things going on in all the schools related to the new strategic plan to support not only the strategic plan, but in this case, the goal. The second one is lead a review of student enrollment in the district, and if necessary, present a redistricting plan to the school committee for their consideration. We know that we have some challenges when it comes to our enrollment in various schools. And this goal is to get the ball rolling on, not only get the ball rolling, but to do a review of enrollment at all the schools and what it really should be. We know this could be a painful process because it may involve redistricting. I don't want to assume that it will. So what we're charging the superintendent to do is to lead this review of student enrollment and, if necessary, present a plan for redistricting. We don't know what that means. So nobody, it's not like we have a plan in mind. This is just the beginning of the process. And the third one is collaborate with high school administrative team to improve the quality of service provided by the guidance department. This is an area of focus that I think we all hear about that is important to every high school student, whether they're going on to a career or college. That our guidance department needs to guide them well. And we're charging this, well, part of this goal, we're charging the superintendent, Mr. Mitchell, to work with the high school administration to make sure that that happens in the coming year. Mr. Mitchell, do you want to say anything about these? Or?
Well, the only thing that I would say is I think that we've had, quite a bit of discussion on each of them. I do think that some of them are ambitious. And as I mentioned in our conversation when we were talking about the goals that we wanted to establish for me this year, the thing that I feel really good about is that we're hitting the ground running with the strategic plan. So, and as you said, there is a lot there, but as we've said right along, we want the strategic plan to be a vibrant document that is on the forefront of our minds and everything that we do. So I think we're off to a good start. We know that we have a lot of work to do there. So we know that high school guidance specifically, and I mean no disrespect to them, but it's clear that there's some work to be done there. And we've already met, and I sort of prepped them to let them know that, that there was some interest on the part of the school committee to make this a goal for me. That in and of itself, I think, says a lot about how important that role is seen by the committee who represent the parents and the students in the Cumberland community. So I think all and redistricting is going to be a massive undertaking in and of itself. And as I mentioned earlier today, we have already met. We've had several conversations about it. We had a meeting where we're starting the plan, and we'll be spending a lot of time on that over the weeks to come because there may be a budgetary impact to that, perhaps in a positive way.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I also, while you were talking, I thought of all the goals that we talked about that we didn't put on paper as part of the list, and some of them are just as important, but they're also things that you're going to be doing anyway. I think of the work that Mr. DeMona's office is doing under your leadership to improve student performance and curriculum changes. All these things are really important, and I think we have a mutual understanding that these are going to continue, and we're not looking to slow down anything like that. So with that said, I would make a motion to approve these goals for the superintendent for the 2017-2018 school year.
Thank you. Mr. Denon has a motion on the floor to approve the superintendent's goals. Mr. Fiorillo has seconded that motion. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, discussion and/or vote to approve resolutions. SC, we'll take the first one, SCR 2017-09, amended fiscal year 18 school budget. Mr. Mitchell, Mr. DeMonica, I apologize. I wasn't sure if Mr. Prigiano was coming up to the microphone or not. So.
I don't think it's necessary, but
Okay.
we can if we need to. What this resolution does is when Mr. Prignano and the superintendent put together a budget proposal for the school year, It's an estimate of positions, steps, and so forth, and what may happen between retirees or wherever it may be. And so this is a resolution, just the budget still stays the same, $66,453,487. But it gets appropriated, put in the line items where they should be now that we know the positions of all the teachers and staff and maintenance people in every school. So it's just adjustments. This is our budget that we approved already, but just amendments to it to get us to where we need to be for reporting, so that when Mr. Pignano brings reports to us, they're accurate when it comes to salaries and benefits and so forth. So it was approved upstairs Tuesday night on a 2-0 vote. Mr. Hess was absent at the time, but this is no real change to the budget, just putting the line items where they should be. So I would move passage.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Mr. DeMonica is recommending passage of SC-R-2017-09. I have a second by Mr. Fiorillo. Geez, Mr. Fiorillo, you must be hungry. You're on the second, like right away. I didn't even finish talking. You're right there. I'm feeling the pressure. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item on the agenda is discussion and a vote to approve resolution SCPR 9 2017-21. Progress payment for health and safety. Mr. DeMonica, is this yours as well?
This is mine as well. It was heard upstairs on Tuesday night. What this is the final payment to E&E Systems of Canton. They were the general contractor 2 years ago when we did McCourt in North Cumberland and Ashton schools. And the work there is finally done. It was being held up with getting the generator done there and tying in the network and so forth and cafeteria stuff. So that work has now been completed, been signed off by Tirado and Associates as they've inspected it to be done. The amount is $45,799.87. It comes from the $5 million bond that was done a few years ago from the town, and it is budgeted in their budget. So we've been holding the money, so we could release it at this time. So I've moved passage on a 2-0 vote.
Mr. DeMonica moves passage on recommends passage on SCPR 9 2017-21. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Fiorillo. Mr. DeMonica, I do have a quick question on that. So when you mentioned that a generator is up and running at this school, is this a fallout shelter? You know?
Originally, it was not going to be a fallout shelter, but now it is going to be an emergency shelter that will dispense medicine throughout the state if necessary.
Had we always had a generator there?
We've always had a generator there. This one had some issues. It got repaired. And in the meantime, when we updated the panel at the school from Federal Pacific, which is faulty, we have one here at the high school as well that needs to be done. All this work took time to get done in between school starting and getting the right parts in. So it took a while, but it's finally completed.
Thank you for that update. So we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and a vote to approve resolution SCPR 9 2017-22.
Mr. Chair, that's mine as well.
DeMonica.
It was heard upstairs on Tuesday, but this is another partial payment to E&E Systems of Canton, Mass. The amount of $484,284. It's for work that's currently going on at Garvin, J.J. McLaughlin, North Cumberland, and community schools. We know we had work done over the summer at Cumberland Hill cafeteria floors and stuff, and just another progress payment. The architect has signed off on this as well as the work is done, and he believes the money can be released. We are still holding money on this bond. So I would move passage of SCPR 9 2017-22 in the amount of $484,284.
Mr. DeMonica is recommending passage on SCPR 9 2017-22. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Hess and Mr. Denon. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item on the agenda, discussion and/or vote to approve homeschool instruction requests for the 2017-18 school year. Mr. DeMona, or Mr. Mitchell, I apologize.
Well, I recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So Mr. Mitchell's recommending, or pleasure of the committee? Mr. Denon makes a motion to approve. Second by Mr. Hess. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next item on the agenda is the personnel recommendations. Mrs. Fogel, welcome.
So I would request the advice and consent on the appointment of the following employees. Christine Hoban, classroom paraprofessional at the preschool center, effective September 25th, 2017. Carrie Launders, library media specialist at community school, effective October 16th, 2017. She's full-time in a step 8. And Stephanie Zerva, classroom paraprofessional in the Strive program at North Cumberland Middle School, effective September 20th, 2017.
Thank you, Mrs. Fogel. Pleasure of the committee. Mrs. Goggin makes a motion to approve the 3 requests for the personnel recommendations. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. DeMonica and Mrs. Friedman. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you,
I just
Mrs.
had 3 coaching appointments.
3 coaching appointments.
We had a few vacants when I came to you last time, so I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the following coaching appointments. Helder Gomes, girls junior varsity volleyball coach. Brandon Hanaway, girls junior varsity tennis coach. And Alex Place, girls soccer coach at McCourt Middle School.
Mrs. Fogel, pleasure of the committee. Mr. Denon makes a motion to approve the 3 coaching positions. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Goggin. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fogel. Next item on the agenda is school committee comments, school liaison reports. Yes.
I just wanted to say I
Goggin.
went to 2 open houses this week here and at North Cumberland, and walked away feeling really great about our schools. The commitment and the excitement the teachers at both places had was a pretty great feeling. I have to say my opinion of 7th grade at the middle school is done a 180. The stuff I heard from my daughter's teachers was incredible. The changes in how they're teaching, and the fact that her math teacher was meeting with all 7th grade math teachers at McCourt and North Cumberland yesterday to go over their most recent test to make sure their grading was consistent was really good to hear. And we did a thinking math and science, and it was kind of fun.
Was Mr. Denon in that meeting of the thinking that? Oh, okay. To see how we did on it. Thank you, Mrs. Goggin. Excellent update. Anyone else would like to add? Mr. Hess?
I'll be brief because I can hear Mr. Fiorella's stomach growling. So I had the privilege of attending the North Cumberland open house as well, and I'll echo Mrs. Goggin and Mr. Denon's comments. It was great. The teachers were incredibly enthusiastic about the curriculum, about the process of education, about the growth they expected from the students. So I'd like to congratulate Principal Coughlin, the faculty and the staff at NCMS specifically, but throughout the district. It was a wonderful open house.
Her boss is to the left of you. Anyone else? Mr. DeMonica.
I just want to say thanks to the Valley Breeze for the stories they did this week, especially on the band. What a heck of a turnaround that's been in the last 3 years. And the man in charge, Mr. Faroche, boy, has he done wonders here. And I think the town people have gone to the school years ago are quite pleased with what's happening here with them going out in the halftime reports. So thank you to the Valley Breeze for that story. And the other thing is, Mr. Chairman, do we have a policy or something that we need to do to send something to a state rep and ask them to do their job?
Mr. DeMonica, we happen to have our policy chairperson sitting right here to my left. We can deflect the question over to him. Mr. Fiorillo?
What is your concern, Mr.
Well, I contacted the state rep, asked them about maybe putting a sidewalk, crosswalk, painting it white down here by Tucker Field by the new entrance, and I was told I needed to follow protocol in order to make that request. And is there a protocol for
I
the school committee?
believe you'd have to maybe bring it up with the police chief.
All right.
That would be my guess, but because it's a state road, it could be different. I really don't know. Actually, you know who might know is Rhett McLaughlin. He's
Yes, I would like to know what the protocol is for a state.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Fogel. That's excellent. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Mrs. Friedman?
So I attended the CHS open house, which is really great too. I mean, it's 2 hours of your time, but time really well spent. And one of my takeaways from it, I went to my son's digital photography class and thought, man, I'd like to take this class. And just thinking about the classes that we offer in the art wing, we've got some incredible stuff there. And maybe at some point we could look at some revenue generation through some adult education, continuing ed stuff. They've got
Very common. Yeah.
really great stuff going on there, and I was learning about aperture and shutter speed and all kinds of stuff. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Friedman. Anyone else? Mr. Fiorillo, could you keep it brief, please? Just kidding.
No, I can't actually. I also went to the open house here at the high school. I was very impressed by the teachers, their enthusiasm, their commitment to trying to reach every single student. I thought that was very impressive. The one takeaway that I thought was negative, and we've already talked about this, is the trans building is old. And in coming months and year, we need to really start looking at repainting those rooms, updating some window treatments. I know that sounds like a strange thing. But I'm sure a lot of parents had the same feeling that I had going through some of those rooms. These teachers are doing their best. These kids are doing great. And we need to start working on some of the interiors of at least of the trans building. But also, as also a liaison to the Cumberland Special Education Committee, the ladies that are on the board of that asked me to read a brief statement because this coming Tuesday is their first meeting of the school year. The Cumberland Special Education Advisory Committee will be having their first meeting of the school year next Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017 at 6 p.m. in the Hayden Center at the Cumberland Library. The Cumberland Special Education Advisory Committee, CEAC, provides parents and community reps a way to communicate with the school system that serves their special needs children. The group, led and organized by parents of students with disabilities, collaborates with district staff and the school committee to improve special education. There will be a presentation from RIPEN, the Rhode Island Parent Information Network, to explain why special education advisory committees are needed in all school districts. Also on the agenda, it will be a discussion collaborating with the Director of Special Education and the school committee to write a policy for inclusion within the PTO's activities and to discuss conducting a short survey with our parents who have children with disabilities in regards to what they'd like to see improve. To see with improved communication between the schools and home. All the meetings are public, of course, and childcare is normally available.
Excellent update, Mr. Fiorillo. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Next item on the agenda. Mr. Mitchell, do we have executive session?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fiorillo makes a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon and Mr. Hess. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 7-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.